Welcome back to Occult Archives, listeners. You know, we love diving into those books, the ones that have sort of gathered dust and whispers through the ages, the ones that people say, oh, you shouldn't read that.
Right. Too powerful, too secret.
Yeah, exactly. Forbidden knowledge, hidden truths. Today's deep dive is no exception. We're cracking open Dion Fortune's Through the Gates of Death.
A title that doesn't really beat around the bush, does it?
It certainly doesn't. Published back in 1932, this book is all about the afterlife. What happens to us? Where do we go? All those big questions that we ponder.
And, maybe more importantly, why are we so afraid of it?
Exactly. So think of this as your guide, your companion, as we navigate Fortune's insights on death, dying, and, yeah, those mysterious realms beyond.
Unraveling those secrets one page at a time.
All right, let's jump right in. One of the first things Fortune addresses is this fear, right? I mean, it's almost universal, the fear of death. And she breaks it down into two main anxieties.
Yeah, I remember this, the unknown, what happens after. It's a big question mark, isn't it?
Oh.
And then, of course, the separation.
Right, leaving everyone and everything behind, the people we love, the experiences. It's heavy stuff. But Fortune, she kind of offers a different perspective on it. She calls death the great Anaesthetist.
It's a striking image. And kind of comforting in a way, isn't it?
It is, like this merciful force bringing a deep sleep, releasing the soul from its earthly ties. Not an end, but a transition. What do you think about that?
Well, it resonates with some ancient traditions. She talks about the Greek mysteries, these ancient rites that supposedly helped initiates conquer their fear of death. By experiencing something beyond, they lost their fear.
It's like a sneak peek takes away the terror.
Precisely.
And then she brings in this whole thing about the Great Pyramid, not as a tomb, but as an initiation chamber. That sarcophagus, a place for a symbolic death and rebirth experience.
Whoa, that's pretty intense. Talk about facing your fears head on.
No kidding. Fortune really emphasizes the power of knowledge and understanding. She compares someone who's prepared for death to a traveler on a luxury liner.
They know where they're going, they're comfortable, they've got their ticket, their itinerary.
Exactly. But then someone who's clueless about what happens after they die, she compares them to, like, a poor peasant immigrant.
Setting off into the unknown, unprepared, scared. It paints a stark picture.
It does. And she brings in the Egyptian Book of the Dead, not as a morbid text, but like a guidebook for the soul.
Ah, right. Instructions for navigating the afterlife.
Yeah, exactly. And what's really interesting is how Fortune talks about life and death as cyclical. It's not a one-way trip. Souls are always moving back and forth between the visible and the invisible. Death isn't the end, just a change in scenery. So for our listeners out there, remember, it's about the journey, not just the destination.
And understanding that journey can alleviate a lot of fear.
Absolutely. Now, she gets into the nitty-gritty of dying itself, crossing the threshold, she calls it, and right away she distinguishes between natural death and violent death.
Two very different experiences, I'd imagine.
For sure. Natural death, she says, is gradual. The soul slowly loosens its hold on the physical body. It's like a child losing baby teeth. It's a natural process.
Makes sense.
But a violent death, it's sudden, shocking, like a tooth being yanked out, a real wrench. And get this, she says that our mental state during death really matters. If we're clinging to life, terrified, it can make the transition much harder.
So our fear can actually hinder the process. Wow.
That's what she says. But then she brings in this idea of the gray angel, this being who helps souls transition peacefully.
So like a spiritual guide during those final moments.
Exactly. Almost like administering a spiritual anesthetic. And then, she describes this awakening in the body of light. This isn't the same as the etheric double, which is more connected to the physical body and kind of fades away during the process.
So the body of light is our vehicle on the other side.
Yeah. Think of it as your soul's new ride.
I like that.
Now, here's where it gets even more interesting. Fortune says that not everyone goes through this sleep of death. People who are psychically developed, they might pass over consciously.
So aware the whole time, like a lucid dream.
Exactly. It's like they're in control of the experience. And, she says that the heaven world, it might feel familiar because our souls visit it every night during sleep. It's just that we don't consciously remember.
Huh. It's like going on vacation and forgetting about it.
Yeah.
Deep down, you've been there.
I love that analogy. And when we arrive, Fortune says we're greeted by loved ones and these ministering souls who are there to help us adjust.
It sounds so welcoming.
It does. Even those who feel alone, she says they'll be met by souls who understand that feeling of longing.
So no one is truly alone in this transition.
Exactly. Now, what about those left behind? Can we talk to the dead? It's a controversial topic, right?
Oh, huge debate.
Fortune acknowledges that. She says there's potential for deception, but also genuine grief that drives people to seek contact. But she's cautious. She says extreme grief is not the right mindset for it.
It clouds judgment, makes you vulnerable.
Exactly. And listen to this. She says that repeatedly trying to call back the dead can be selfish.
Selfish? How so?
Well, she compares it to a kid at boarding school who's constantly being called home by their parents.
They can't settle in, make new friends, experience life there.
Right. It hinders their progress. And while newly departed souls might be more accessible, they eventually move on to realms where that kind of communication isn't possible.
So we might be holding them back.
That's the idea. And then she introduces this concept of an intermediate state right after death, a kind of processing phase, a waiting room, if you will.
A transition period.
Yeah, where postmortem pathologies can happen. It's where she talks about masses for the dead, the Catholic tradition.
To help with the transition.
Right. But she distinguishes that from purgatory. Purgatory, she says, it's not a place. It's a state of consciousness.
Like a self-reflection zone?
Yeah, where the soul confronts its own actions, its motivations. It's the soul's reaction that creates the cleansing fire.
It's facing yourself, the good and the bad. No escaping it.
Right. And during this time, communication with our world is cut off. It's necessary, she says, for the soul to process without distractions.
A time for introspection.
Exactly. She also mentions this, an esoteric viewpoint, that masses can't actually help someone in purgatory.
Because the soul is under the jurisdiction of the lords of karma. Right, they call the shots.
That's it. But she does say that communication can be reestablished later on, after purgatory, through clairaudience.
So inner hearing rather than seeing.
Exactly. Now, grief. It's a huge part of the human experience. Fortune frames it as a test of our spiritual understanding.
Because it reveals what we truly believe about life and death.
That's right. Our reaction to death shows whether we see the body as everything or if we believe in a soul that continues on. And she talks about different kinds of love, the possessive kind versus true love.
Right, the needy kind versus the spiritual kind.
She describes true love as this radiation from the soul. It's not about needing or possessing, it's about a deeper connection.
It's almost like a higher frequency.
Exactly. And she says that a really intense, overwhelming grief might mean we've sort of made an idol of the person we've lost.
Put them on a pedestal above even the divine.
That's the idea. It's about being God-centered, not person-centered, in our understanding of loss.
So death is a separation, but not an annihilation of that connection.
That's right. And she brings in the inner planes again, talking about their timeless nature. True spiritual bonds, she says, transcend physical distance. It's like a constant radio frequency.
Always there, if you know how to tune in.
Exactly. Now let's talk about the appointed time. Can death be predicted? Fortune says astrology can offer some insight, but it's not set in stone.
Right. She mentions these tides of death in a person's chart.
Yeah, but it's not a guarantee. And she highlights the power of faith and willpower. They can actually influence these predicted times.
So we're not just puppets of fate.
Nope, we have some agency. She even cautions astrologers about revealing specific death times. It could become a self-fulfilling prophecy.
The power of suggestion is real.
It is, and she talks about premature death, dying before your time, before around 70. She generally sees it as a misfortune.
Because it cuts short our opportunity to learn and grow and fulfill our karmic debts.
Exactly. But after a full lifespan, she suggests approaching death with acceptance, seeing it as a natural conclusion. It's about distinguishing between karma that might cause a premature death and the natural spiritual law that withdraws a soul when its work is done.
Like a fruit ripening and falling from the tree.
Perfect analogy. And she encourages us to see death not as this great enemy, but as the opener of the gates of life. It's a powerful reframing.
It is. It takes away some of the sting.
Now, let's get into some of those traditional customs around death and their psychic significance. Why do we place candles and flowers in a death chamber? Fortune explains it all has to do with the etheric double.
Right, that subtle body that lingers after physical death.
Candles provide etheric energy to support it during its transition. Prayers said at specific times also help the departing soul.
But incense, not recommended. It could cause unwanted materializations, complicate things.
Right. Even drawing the blinds has a reason. Sunlight can disperse the etheric double too quickly. Wearing black helps insulate the living from those etheric vibrations.
It's like a psychic shield.
Exactly. And she encourages us to think of the dead as living in another state of consciousness, not as dust.
To remember their essence continues on.
Exactly. From an esoteric perspective, she advocates for cremation. It helps both the soul and the living to detach from the physical body. But if cremation isn't chosen, planting a tree on the grave is a symbolic act of new life.
It's beautiful imagery.
Even gravestones have meaning. She prefers the Celtic cross, symbolizing life triumphant, over the Calvary cross, which emphasizes sacrifice. And a simple casket is best, allowing the body to return to the earth quickly.
It's all about facilitating the natural processes.
Now, in The Death of the Body, Fortune describes the body as a machine. It's a vehicle for our soul's growth, powered by energy. Death is just a part of that growth, like a caterpillar becoming a butterfly.
It's a transformation, not an end.
She distinguishes between the physical view of death, like a machine just stopping, and the esoteric view, which sees it as a whole process of transition on multiple levels. And this is interesting. She considers death by disease as unnatural.
Because it's a disruption of natural law,
Yeah.
right? A result of some kind of imbalance.
That's the idea. Natural death, for her, occurs when we've worked out our karma for that lifetime. It's a gradual process, like dying in sleep.
Peaceful.
So how should we approach our own death? Fortune suggests meditating on it, not in a morbid way, but focusing on liberation from the body's limitations.
Contemplating the possibilities that await us.
Exactly. Visualizing reunions with loved ones, sending them telepathic messages. She even tells a story about a dog sensing its deceased owner.
Showing that unseen communication does happen.
It's all about cultivating that awareness. She also recommends connecting with inner plane beings and guides even before death.
So we're not alone on this journey. There are helpers waiting.
Absolutely. The key is to familiarize ourselves with the idea of the afterlife, to reduce our fear and focus on the new experiences awaiting us in the body of light.
It's like preparing for an exciting adventure.
Now, in the hidden side of death, Fortune reveals the complexities of the physical process. Even after the soul departs, the living have responsibilities.
We need to ensure the body returns to the earth harmoniously and support the departing soul with our thoughts and emotions.
Right, like a telepathic send-off. She talks about the soul potentially being outside the body before clinical death, connected by the silver cord, and then there's the etching of the seed atom in the final moments.
It's like imprinting our life experiences onto an energetic blueprint that carries forward into future lives.
And in cases of sudden death where this etching can't happen, she says the soul might immediately seek a short rebirth just to die properly. It's wild, isn't it?
It is. It shows how important this process is. She also describes how the atmosphere of the room changes after the soul leaves. The body comes under the influence of elemental forces, and bacteria start the decomposition process.
She actually identifies the 4 archangels who oversee this return to dust: Raphael, Michael, Gabriel, and Uriel. She even recommends invoking them to clear any negative energies.
It's like asking for spiritual assistance with the physical process.
Exactly. Then she talks about the etheric double, its withdrawal marking the cessation of breath. The soul remains unconscious within it for a short time, usually a few hours to a few days.
And if it lingers too long or wakes up within the etheric double, that's when you get ghost walking.
Right. And eventually, the etheric double loses its energy, the soul fully detaches, and that's the second half of physical death. It's why we shouldn't try to immediately contact the dead. We could disturb this process.
They need their rest, just like we do after a big change.
Now, let's talk about purgatory. Fortune describes it as a cleansing dream, not a place of punishment. It's on the astral plane, the realm of emotions and desires, and it's where we review our life, our actions, our motivations.
It's like a giant life review session.
Exactly. Our higher consciousness acts as a mirror, showing us our shortcomings. She compares it to the conflict between our higher and lower selves in psychology.
The struggle between our ideals and our actions.
In the scenery of purgatory, it's not random. It reflects our own issues, our personal and religious symbols.
It's tailor-made to our soul's needs.
The big lesson of purgatory is that actions have consequences, that going against spiritual law brings suffering. But it's not eternal damnation, it's a temporary cleansing fire. However, not all karmic baggage can be cleared in one go. We might need to return to Earth to work out the rest.
So multiple purgatory visits might be necessary.
It's all about learning and growth. She also explains that while masses and prayers can't exempt us from purgatory, they can help.
It's like sending a care package. It doesn't get you out of the situation, but it helps you through it.
Right. Focused telepathic energy and intention can speed up the soul's learning process. And telepathic communication after death is possible, especially if there was a strong connection during life.
So the bonds we create can actually help us on the other side.
It's amazing. She even talks about this practice of reviewing your day in reverse as a way to understand your karma and access past life memories.
So purgatory is about healing, not punishment. It's a chance to learn and grow.
Now, the heaven world. Fortune addresses those materialistic depictions we often hear. She says heaven isn't a physical place, it's a state of consciousness.
More like a dream state.
Exactly. It's a time for wish fulfillment, experiencing our deepest desires and ideals. And she says that even seemingly mundane heavens serve a purpose for the soul.
It's all relative to our own level of development.
Right. We shouldn't judge other people's heavens. She compares accounts from recently passed individuals to a hospital patient describing their room. They have a limited view.
It's just one small part of a much bigger picture.
And she compares guides to probationer nurses who have some knowledge, and masters, those who have transcended death and rebirth, to doctors. They have the full understanding.
So we need to be careful who we get our information from.
For sure. She describes heaven initially as a place of rest and restoration, followed by phases of learning and growth.
Like a school and a college rolled into one.
Exactly. And she reminds us that even Earth is a state of consciousness, a particular way of perceiving reality. Incarnation is our consciousness focusing on these physical forms, and discarnation, death, is becoming subjective, aware only of our own consciousness.
So death is just a shift in focus, not an ending.
That's it. The soul remains unchanged. In heaven, through focused mental activity, we build thought forms and engage in a kind of self-hypnosis.
It's like programming our future selves.
Exactly. Artists in heaven can create without limitations, developing their skills for future lives. And the experiences in purgatory, they help neutralize our less evolved desires.
It's all about refinement.
Unfulfilled desires from our earthly life can even be fulfilled in heaven, building up potential for our next incarnation. It's fascinating.
It really is. It's a whole system of growth and development.
Now, Fortune talks about communication with the departed. She advocates for a middle way approach. Not complete dismissal, but not indiscriminate contact either.
It's about balance and discernment.
She says there's a natural psychic connection as long as we remember and love the departed.
Our memories and emotions keep that connection alive.
Right. And those who have recently passed, they're still in a similar state of consciousness, so they're easier to reach. But that fades over time unless we actively refresh those memories. She suggests brief, harmonious interactions with aligned souls are okay, even beneficial if there are unresolved issues.
Like checking in and offering support.
But she warns against constantly calling up the dead. It can disrupt their progress, even make them earthbound.
It's like preventing them from moving on with their lives.
Exactly. Too much communication can be harmful to both the living and the dead. Experienced mediums work with guides to close the gates after communication.
It's like a safety protocol.
Fortune cautions against uncontrolled contact, especially for inexperienced individuals. She distinguishes that from the work of trained investigators who work with willing spirit entities for research purposes.
It's about having the right knowledge and skills.
It is. Her advice is to be careful and prioritize the well-being of both the living and the dead. She acknowledges the spiritualistic movement's contribution to understanding survival after death, but she ultimately suggests accepting that truth and allowing our loved ones to move on in peace. If a psychic spontaneously offers contact and gives genuine evidence, then consider responding.
It's about trust and discernment.
Now, the pathologies of death. These are situations where things don't go smoothly and the soul has trouble detaching.
Obstacles on the path, so to speak.
Exactly. This can happen when the dying person is afraid and clinging to life, or when the soul lingers in an intermediate state.
So there can be difficulties on both ends.
Understanding these challenges helps us reduce fear. Fortune emphasizes the importance of our mental state during death. She compares the soul's presentation at death to a baby's presentation at birth.
If it's not aligned properly, it can be problematic.
Exactly. If the lower consciousness is forced out before the higher consciousness is ready, it can cause confusion.
Like being pushed out the door before you're dressed.
She says a lot of work on the inner planes involves helping these disoriented souls. And this is why some traditions pray against sudden death. The soul needs time to prepare.
It's like getting ready for a big journey. You need to pack your bags, say your goodbyes.
Those who die suddenly or unconsciously face particular difficulties, but she talks about watchers on the inner planes who help these souls.
So there's still support, even in those situations.
Yes. And then there's malpresentation at death, where the soul is resisting, facing the wrong way. Fear of death is often the cause.
It's like trying to go back into the womb instead of moving forward into the light.
She describes souls who die in fear, not even realizing they're dead, seeing the living as ghosts. She cautions against inexperienced people trying to rescue these souls.
It's delicate work, best left to those with the right knowledge and skills.
Right. The goal is to help them detach from the earth and move towards the light. In cases of accidental death, the shock often acts as an anesthetic, so they're dazed but not distressed. But with prolonged unconsciousness after head injury, there might be glimpses of the inner planes near the end. That's where spiritual practices and the presence of loved ones can be really helpful.
It's like easing their transition.
Now, in the Pathologies of Death too, Fortune talks about the impact of fear. Intense fear prevents that peaceful sleep of death.
It keeps us anchored to the physical plane.
Right, and she distinguishes between the fear of dying and the fear felt during a violent attack. Victims of violence, she says, are initially fearful and confused, but they're quickly helped by invisible helpers.
So they're not alone?
But the thought form of their fear, that can linger at the location of the event. It's not the victim who's earthbound, but the energetic imprint of their terror.
Like a psychic residue.
Holding a service at the site can help break up these thought forms, and she outlines a specific ritual for souls who have died suddenly or violently. It involves a ministrant, a lector, prayers, hymns, visualizations.
It's a beautiful and powerful way to offer support.
The goal is to help the soul move on, not to keep calling it back. She compares it to someone falling in the mud. We help them clean up and reach the other side. Delaying their journey can be detrimental.
It's about encouraging them to keep moving forward.
Now, lastly, how the adept meets death. Adepts, she says, they face death with serenity. They've conquered fear through their spiritual practices and knowledge of reincarnation.
They've done the inner work.
They regularly withdraw their consciousness from the body in meditation, so death is familiar. They see the body as a temporary tool, an observation post. When the call to withdraw comes, they accept it without complaint, whether it's due to the body's decline or the completion of their tasks.
It's a surrender to a higher purpose.
In their final meditation, they review their life's lessons and prepare for the next life, if that's their destiny. They even construct the archetype for their new etheric body and imprint their seed atom with their spiritual knowledge.
It's like consciously designing their next vehicle.
They understand the interplay of free will and destiny, and they formulate their ideals to guide them after death. For them, death is not a separation from loved ones, but a deeper union with their higher selves.
It's a transcendence of earthly limitations.
As they pass, they might summon loved ones, both physical and astral, to ease the transition. There might be a magic circle, silent meditation, a vision of a mighty one meeting them, and a final burst of light as they depart.
It's a beautiful and inspiring vision of a conscious death.
It is. So there you have it, Dion Fortune's Through the Gates of Death. It's a deep dive into the mysteries of death and the afterlife.
It's a reminder that death is not the end, but a transition.
We've looked at the fear of death, the process of dying, the nature of the afterlife, and even those potential challenges that can arise. It's all about knowledge and understanding, empowering us to face our own mortality and the loss of loved ones with more peace and acceptance.
And maybe even a sense of anticipation for what lies beyond.
Exactly. But here's a final thought for you, listener. If, as Fortune suggests, our beliefs and fears shape our experience of the afterlife, imagine what we could achieve if we shifted our collective perspective on death.
If we embraced it as a natural part of life, a transition, a doorway to something more.
How might that transform our individual and collective experiences of dying and beyond? It's something to ponder.
Until next time, keep exploring.
And keep those lanterns lit.